what is ISO 20022 and what is the motivation behind its adoption? So when we send a payment, we think of it as a very simple thing, but actually behind the scenes, within the plumbing of the banking and the payment system, there's an awful lot of data required by different teams within banks to actually make sure that that payment meets various compliance requirements. And particularly if that payment is crossing jurisdictions, so it's cross-border payments, it has to meet different regulatory requirements in all the jurisdictions that it's flowing through. So the ISO 20022 format has got about 1,000 different placeholders for data in. And that is to allow for all the data that's needed by all the various banks and participants in the chain from it beginning to the payment ending. And the idea is that the more that data can be populated at the beginning, the smoother that process is for the payment as it flows through the chain. How does ISO 20022 contribute to a better payment experience, and in particular, the addition of more data beyond just bank details and sort code? So if you can imagine today, you're sending a payment internationally, you have their IBAN and a name maybe, and you put that into your bank portal and you initiate the payment. That payment is going to get stopped, probably by a compliance team in the bank, and they're probably going to phone you up and ask you for more bits of information. Who's it going to? Can you give us the address of the person? What's it for? Right? Is this the actual end, the ultimate beneficiary, right? Or is that money then going to be transferred on somewhere else? All of those questions you could have answered had you put those bits of data into the payment at the beginning. That is what the ISO 20022 framework is designed to do. The idea is that, okay, at the beginning of that payment, I had all that data in, so I've still got the name and the amount, but now I've got the ultimate beneficiary, I've got the address of the beneficiary, I've got some the passport details maybe, or the legal entity identifier, I've got where the money's ultimately going. All of that data's in there, so the bank or banks to which the payment's flowing can now look at that, and they don't have to call you up. They can make their checks, say it's okay, and the payment will just proceed and progress much more smoothly. So how does ISO 20022 result in richer statement data? So if you imagine the scenario where, as well as adding addresses into payments, imagine you could add the reason why you're making the payment. So that may not be, you can imagine if you buy a coffee, it's relatively straightforward. I'm buying a coffee in Starbucks, but if you are sending a payment to a supplier, let's say to pay for a couple of invoices, then today you would have to send that supplier some information to say, I've sent you a payment, let's say it's $100, the $100 covers these 3 invoices. Using ISO 20022, you can actually add that information into the payment instruction itself. It's called structured remittance. So now, when I receive that money, I don't just get $100 on my bank or £100 on my bank statements. I actually get all of that data that you've sent that tells me what that payment is for. So it says it's for these 3 invoices, invoice number 1, invoice number 2, invoice number 3. So if you can imagine a bank statement as having, for any one entry, imagine it's got hundreds and hundreds of lines of data that explain to you in granular detail exactly what that payment's for. The huge benefit of that is around reconciliation. So for pretty much every business, they're having to reconcile what's on their bank statement to what they're expecting in, and it's really hard because the numbers don't tally up sometimes. Maybe I've only paid 2 of the 3 invoices, maybe I've paid 3 but I've taken a discount off 1, right? So that is all the kind of data that you can now send using ISO 20022 that will be available to businesses via their statements. Does ISO 20022 help organisations be more compliant or become more compliant? The short answer is yes, because it actually forces you to add or to know where these payments are going and to be able to add this data to it before you send them. So actually it will push a number of organisations into having, for example, sanctions compliance or transaction monitoring or adding confirmation of payee services, etc., so that they actually know where this money's going and who they're sending it to. Then likewise, if you imagine you've now got much richer data on your statements, you can use that for much better reconciliation and to increase the automated matching of reconciliation. And that's one of the biggest areas of kind of fraud, is really around using manual reconciliation to kind of hide fraud. So the more that you can automate that, the better.